Welcome to WebEx. Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound. Enter your attendee ID number followed by pound. If you do not know your attendee number, press pound to continue.
Okay, Marco, I think you have the next question.
We're ready to vote. TriMet differs from many of our municipal jurisdictions in that they have general obligations that provide property tax, and TriMet does not. But you do have a lot of debt, and we have revenue bonds, payroll bonds, and lines of credit. So the question is whether any of your debt service sources of funds are vulnerable, what coverage you have, and what assurances can you give us that you are positioned to be on debt service request.
Sure. We are very careful with our debt service. You're right. We do have quite a bit of debt, but that debt service is rated, for the most part, AAA, aside from our Garvey bonds, by 3 agencies. The Garvey bonds are secured by funds from Metro, which are not at risk. The senior lien payroll tax bonds are at risk because they're supported by payroll tax revenue. So, as we discussed earlier, they are key revenues, but TriMet has exceptionally strong debt coverage thanks to its low debt ceiling, currently at 7.5% of continuing revenues. So we expect to have more than adequate levels of revenue to pay all debt service. We were recently reviewed by Moody's, and they felt that the coverage was sufficient and adequate to see us through the recessionary downturn and did not recommend any sort of further investigation. So our AAAs from Moody's are not at risk.
Great.
My turn. And we'll shift a little bit particularly to kind of the broader strategic decisions of TriMet. So I want to talk a little bit about the means of collecting fair revenue and how that's been changing so significantly over the last 2 years. Low-income fare program, HOP Pass, temporarily eliminating cash fares, and of course decreased ridership, all have impacted fare revenue. Some of these changes are good for customer service, but have adverse impacts on fare generation. We'd like to know what is working well and benefiting TriMet and the riders, and what has had an adverse impact. And we also, in addition to that, how has not accepting cash affected the district's targeted equity and inclusion groups? And is TriMet forecasting any changes in the means of collecting fares or the amount of fares collected because of those things?
This is Bernie Bottomley. I'm the Executive Director of Public Affairs at TriMet, and I'll field this question. If there's a silver lining in the COVID response period, and let me check. Can folks hear me? I've just had a lot of yellow triangles show up on my screen. You're okay. Can you hear me? Okay, great. So if there's a silver lining in this period, it may be the performance of the HOP electronic fare program. It's allowed us to continue to collect fares during this period, even though we're not accepting cash, because cash has a lot of hands touching it and is a significant potential vector for the virus. Many other transit districts have had to suspend collecting any fares because they don't have an alternative like the HOP program. We were fortunate in that there was about a 50% market penetration for HOP before the crisis hit, so about half of our revenue was coming in via the HOP Pass system. It's a non-contact or very light contact system, so it's easy to clean the HOP readers. It's very difficult to clean money when it comes in. So it's reduced the opportunity for transmission. It also is a much quicker way of collecting fares, and the operator on the bus is farther from the operator. So as people are pausing to tap their card, they're not within that 6-foot social distancing envelope, which is helpful as well. And then adoption of the HOP card allowed us to implement the low-income fare program. It really wasn't manageable before that. And we have about 30,000 folks signed up under the low-income fare program. And so it really has allowed us to continue to serve those folks who have income limitations and for whom it's difficult to come up with a cash fare on a regular basis, full cash fare on a regular basis. We don't expect or we do expect to start accepting cash fares again in the relatively near future. We're still waiting for, obviously, the healthcare professionals to give us guidance on that. But we do expect that HOP adoption will be accelerated even more than it already has been by this period where we've been accepting only the HOP cards on the system. One of the other benefits of the HOP implementation and the low-income fare program is that we've developed significant relationships with a lot of community-based organizations. We don't make the low-income fare determinations ourselves. We partner with other organizations that serve low-income communities. They do the determination on our behalf, and that's created a really good network of folks that can use to help the community during this system. We've been reaching out to those folks and letting them know that there are free HOP cards that folks who can't afford the normal HOP program and would normally pay with cash, they can access those free HOP cards and continue to use the system. And so then just on the equity issue, we don't think there's too much of an issue there because we have been distributing the free HOP cards because of the low-income fare program. And then we have also shifted, we're not doing fare enforcement on the buses. Fare enforcement and the operators are instructed that they're fare informers, not fare enforcers, so they let folks know that we do expect them to pay a fare. If they don't have cash, we're not refusing them a ride or anything of that point. We let them know that there are outlets where they can get free HOP cards, but we still continue to allow them to ride. So for the time being, we don't think that there's a significant issue there. And we've continued to serve the community and we've not heard concerns from those community-based organizations that I mentioned we work with.
And thanks, Bernie, to this, that we watch daily what other transit agencies like ourselves are doing throughout the country. We are starting to see the early signals of some transit agencies moving back to collecting cash. We've not done that. I think right now we are going to hold off for at least some period of time here. I think we're really appealing to the users to, if you use the system, please pay, help us keep the services going. So there's a bit of a conscience here, and we're asking people to be considerate of that. But we are watching our other agencies across the country in this evolution, but we're going to hold the line for now.
I think that makes sense. I had a follow-up question. I'm interested in, have you spent additional time expanding that network of agencies and community groups for the low-income fare program? I'm curious about how that might expand over the economic downturn and how you can reach out, or what you're doing to reach out to additional groups to make sure that access is clear.
Yeah, and that's a great question. We have about 400 community-based organizations throughout the region now that we're partnering with on the low-income fare program. And we are working with them currently to identify groups or individuals that are, they may not qualify for the low-income fare under the traditional measures, which has to do with the federal poverty level and so forth, and require a certain amount of time. So we're trying to identify those folks who are expected to be temporarily unemployed and may not qualify in the strict sense for the under the federal guidelines, and work to get cards out into their hands as well.
I had one more follow-up question. I'm interested in I appreciate the distinction between fare informer and fare enforcer, and then that probably follows to, I'm interested how that follows with the distribution of masks and things like that, or the offering of masks, and how you're protecting your employees and also community members if there's conflict around wearing masks and things like that. As we kind of move to this next phase.
Yeah, that's a good question. Do you want to handle that, or you want me to take it?
Sure, yeah. So I think whether it be we're charging for $2.50 or $5, COVID or no COVID, it's not worth the conflict. We don't want to have people harmed on the system with assaults and things of that nature, where this industry sometimes has. That's one of the reasons we also, for our bus operators, made the decision, which we thought was related, it was to help our operators with assaults, frankly, but actually putting bus barriers on all buses. So that's going to, I've just authorized about another $2.8 million to implement full bus barriers on all buses. To the mask question, so protecting our operators is really foundational here, not only for physical, but also for the virus. So these barriers are having an unintended benefit now, and we're seeing many agencies throughout the country moving this exact step. To the masks themselves, we will be, we've undertaken this because we want the surety of, I do not want us to be at the intersection of where tracing as it becomes more prevalent, to show that transit, in fact, is the significant conduit where the tracing can catch up to us and spread this virus. So we have a really great team who's been really creative. We are creating these special boxes. We've got over 1 million masks in. I think another 1 million arrived this week, I believe. And so we're creating dispensers near the front of the bus, including hand sanitizers that we're going to be installing on all buses and trains for people for self-distribution. So the operator won't be handing them up because they need to stay focused on the road and all the other elements that come with this responsibility. So we don't know how rampant this will be, but we have decided to go all in and to say we are going to be a place where people go to be safe, including masks. There are exceptions to masks. There are people, or children under 2. There are individuals with medical conditions who may not be allowed. So I think we have to be careful to not be racing to judgment should someone not have a mask. Part of the governor's foresight and our discussions we have with him, and I personally had about a 3/4 hour discussion with the governor, briefing her on the transit protocols that she's come out with now, which I think are excellent, is if someone also is showing significant coughs or looking like they've got a problem on the way to the hospital, TriMet is going to undertake to get them there to the hospital. It may not be on the bus. We may find some other form of transportation for them to protect us spreading and to be in a conduit for this. So there's quite a number of layers to this. The mask is the physical symbol and a physical transaction, but there are other steps behind the scenes that we're undertaking as well. But confrontation is if that happens, then we have failed. And so this is about ensuring people are considerate for each other and creating an environment where people are looking out for themselves, but the consideration for others as well. So there's a delicate balance in this, but we're treating the mask inform and supply, not inform and restrict.
That's great. Thanks for being so proactive about all of this.
Yeah, thank you. So I have the next question, and shifting gears a little bit, we're going to talk about capital investments. So the proposed budget has $300 million in capital projects, capital equipment spending, including new and replacement vehicles, state of good repair projects, and system expansion and enhancements. So included in these projects are ones to decrease the district's carbon footprint. We're wondering basically if the number and the amount of spending in these projects is still viable. It looked to us like it was the highest in at least the last several years. And if funding becomes impossible or limited, how is TriMet going to prioritize the capital projects that we're seeing in this budget?
That's a great question and a very complex topic, as you know, with capital management. So firstly, I'm able to divide this into a few different buckets. The first one is TriMet. In fact, the report is just out. I haven't reviewed yet, but TriMet has now conducted its first internal carbon baseline audit. So we need to understand where we are today, not just for the external services, for the obvious significant GHG reducers or carbon footprint called the buses and diesel. So there are a number of things that we are doing that we're adjusting. So for the first and the operating side, what we're doing, because I look at this is all $1. There's different tax treatments called capital but operating, but they're all instruments to execute the things we need to do. So, for example, while we transition out of diesel, we've now made a decision. We are going to be moving to R99 diesel, which really reduces the footprint because many of our buses are funded through the FTA, and we have about a 16-year life cycle on them, so we don't get rid of the bus until it's finished its life cycle. So the diesel investment that we deferred that by about 6 months. We were hoping to have done it now, but we pushed it off until this one example of adjustments in the game. We still intend to do it. The price differential between base diesel and R99 with an 80-20 blend is actually a lot more favorable right now. So in about 4 months or so, we anticipate we'll lock in and start that transition to reduce our carbon footprint. So that's not a capital expenditure, but it's an example of how we manage the footprint, where we manage the speed of some of these capital programs and then the severity of the economy. We also have, we are also bringing in North America's very first recycled, fully articulated bus from literally phoenixing it, from stripping it down from what was thrown away as a bus and rebuilding it from a diesel bus into North America's first recycled electric bus. So we're continuing, that will be received here. In fact, I think it's next month is when it comes in. So some of these expenditures are already in play. We will manage the trajectory that we will still achieve by 2040, and I'm going to underemphasize this, or before, to be out of diesel. So what that trajectory looks like, we will accelerate some of these expenditures, hopefully through third-party funding. If the T2020 bond measure goes through, there'll be a contribution of a number of billions of dollars, hopefully per year, into that. We'll continue to pursue federal funding, which we've been very fortunate to have, that helps us convert some of the fleet over in an accelerated way. We're also piloting retrofitting some of our existing buses as they come off. We're learning as we go here because the electric industry and the bus industry is still not mature yet in its performance. So we're even considering to accelerate converting some existing rebuilt diesel buses over to electric now. So we've got a number of those going on to continue to keep our eye on the North Star of that reduced carbon footprint. Some of the other capital projects we have, if we look back, look at the MAX system, we're now at the tail end of our first generation of rail, using the rail network. And so now we're having to move to state of good repair, where you have to rebuild the railway while you run it, versus it was a lot of it was first generation, build the next line, like the Orange Line was in 2015. The steel bridge is a great example, as I talked about earlier, of you have to spend to stay in the game. What we are not going to do is we are not going to, as I said in my opening remarks, compromise safety. So there are elements we have in our capital portfolio that are the year in question, a few years out, and long term. A capital projects are at the high point now of cash flow, where they're being deployed. So we have a Powell Garage, for example, that we're rebuilding right now. I think it's about a $130 million project. So we have to rebuild. Buildings old, and so some of them are absolutely just going to get done. Division Transit is another example. We're investing for the long term with our strong partnership with the FDA. So if we can get cheap federal dollars, so to speak, of our partners, we're going to continue to do those based on our affordability. The Southwest Corridor is another example of a very long-term project, but that would be triggered through a set of complex hoops, including the T2020 ballot, which is due up through Metro's meeting this fall. So we divide short, medium, and long-term capital, which these are different streams of expenditure that are underway right now. So we have a complex portfolio. Some of our state of good repair has more flexibility. When do you replace an elevator? It doesn't have to be that year. You have flexibility. So we have levers at our disposal to manage the timeliness of its performance, whether it be a vehicle replacement or basically a Ford EcoBoost car, let alone to a rail car, which is about $150 million expenditures that are flowing through right now. So it's the big heavy expenditures. Once you're in, you're in. It's those smaller ones where we've got flexibility. When do you upgrade that next station? I think that gives us a fair amount of latitude to balance a large capital portfolio. So I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on this as well. Or if I've adequately answered your question.
Thanks. I mean, I think that was a really good answer. I did just want to ask, I guess, one minor thing, and I know we're limited on time. So that last part of what you talked about, I think that is the right answer of being able to, ramp down and ramp up other things. Given how long some of these projects take, I mean, even a minor project like replacing an elevator, I imagine has, 6 months, longer of like kind of lead up and public, information and that kind of thing. Do you feel like, given that our circumstances are changing so quickly right now, that, you do feel comfortable that you're kind of able to ramp up and ramp down these capital projects in order to stay in line with expected funds?
Well, one thing I learned a long time ago, in roles like this, you should never feel comfortable to start with. That is a challenge, is trying to anticipate longevity of lead time. Because sometimes, like the steel bridge, for example, we are actually at a decision, are we going to go or not, literally this week. So some parts in rail being manufactured overseas, that's within a year and a half of their lead time, just to build up to have them manufactured to arrive to activate whether we go or not. So we have some flexibility on timing. So you have to manage supply chain issues with each project, and that is going to continue to be a challenge. If we will, depending on where we think the finances and the flexibility of the organization's financial circumstances are, those where we have latitude, we are already holding back. So as soon as it kicked in, in sort of mid to late March, COVID-19, immediately started a review. I personally went through with every single department, every single capital project. Where can we defer, de-scope, etc.? And so we started peeling back the obvious ones and some that are already underway, because we're in, you can't stop it. So some that had flexibility before we activated, I put those on hold immediately. So it's going to be an imperfect dance while we manage long lead times and those are some of the variables we all factor into our decisions. And in fact, there's new things that emerged that we hadn't even anticipated. We have some IT expenditures that were not anticipated, that if we want to be in the business, we got to do it. Something where they're R&D related a little bit, where we play on that edge of innovation. And this agency is really good at this space. We're pulling our horns in a little bit right now.
That makes sense. Thank you so much for the clarification.
Okay, I have the final question. And this has to do with some of the comments you made in your earlier remarks, Mr. Kelsey. And that's all the balancing that you do and focusing on not only the short-term issues, but over the long run. And this is kind of a long-run question. we've noticed in the last four of the last 5 years that ridership has decreased. But beginning of this year, we saw ridership was beginning to increase significantly. Then came, of course, the pandemic, which caused the huge loss that you'd already talked about. So how has the district contemplated the long-term effects of the decreased ridership? And how will the district lure riders back, not just in the short-term issue, but over the long run after the pandemic is over?
Yeah, that's a great question. I start from the basics. I came from the private sector as well. I've been in by choice, wanting to work around the customer environment my whole career, and been through where oil prices have literally gone to zero before as well. So the dynamics of a changing environment, as we behave continue to be as a customer-centric organization, but a semi-utility type of approach. We are going to have to look at managing our customer segments in different ways, in my opinion. So, for example, we've actually activated Bernie Bottomley from earlier this morning is leading for us all a ridership recovery group. We need to understand and listen to our customers, new segments. Many folks are going to be working from home more on a continuous basis than ever have before, I would suggest. So those are customers we may not see on a Monday to Friday basis. There may be 1, 2, 3 days where they're now working from home where they did before. Conversely, I think there's some other folks, due to the pain of the economy, I think are opportunistic for us to where they may have been driving their cars, maybe opportunities for us that we haven't contemplated. So I think we need to look at segmentation of our customers. And this is where I think Bernie Bottomley spoke about earlier. Our hop card will pay, I think, significant dividends for this agency, because we were basically a paper agency, like most agencies were. I could get paper transfers, but we didn't know where they got on, got off, what their behaviors were at an aggregate level. So with this data now, we're going to have to be evolving in our sophistication to understand the customers more and look at value packaging more, I think, in different ways. So I think we're in a very different time right now. I'm optimistic that, like any business, when you put more service out, it takes for a while for service to recover. So open a retail store and you're at mature store volume of any kind. The same thing will be putting out to HC 17. That money has not been spoken about this morning, but that's a really important decision by the legislature of the state. And so that's a revenue scheme that will help us in our recovery for putting new services back out and products, in addition to the funding we want to have to restore service from the 20% bus cuts back up. So we are going to have to learn to probably market more. So I think we're going to have to put more money into our marketing as opposed to straight communication. So these are areas where we're going to have to invest, as opposed to it's just not all going to be cost cutting. So I think that, plus coming out with new products, and we're exploring things like Wi-Fi on the system. We're going to have to look at what I'll refer to as a value proposition, I think, in the years ahead. We're actually piloting right now a headset tour in potentially in multiple languages that get to a different segment when we actually have capacity available, as an example. So, and how do we use that with low cost to leverage our existing very precious asset base of about $6 billion? So I think that'd be, in addition to these other large investments. The Southwest Corridor, as an example, if it goes, is the largest greenhouse gas reducer, and that's about 37,500 rides a day once you hit maturity on that. The Division Transit project is going to reduce travel times by 20%. We're closing train stations to speed the system up. So if you look at our existing portfolio, what can we do with what we have today to squeeze the asset or make these assets sweat differently to bring a better experience to in totality?
That's very perceptive of you. But how do you know that you're not a large department store on that path versus a Walmart or an Amazon on the other side of the path? I mean, how do you know where you're ultimately heading towards?
Well, I think personally, if we are having come from the retail industry, you're right. There used to be a great company called Blockbuster that doesn't exist now.
Exactly.
There's a history that's unfolding right now. I think we're a combination of also service and policy. for our planet. So as vehicles come under more and more pressure, I believe there's a wonderful opportunity on the top tier group of how you get around in your life with mobility, of cycling, walking, and yes, public transportation. The board had great vision a few years ago. We moved ourselves from the mindset of just a transit authority to a mobility agency. How do we connect and remove the friction? So we have to come up with better products where you can enter, and we're doing a partnership right now with Visa and through the FDA and FDA grants, ourselves and other partners, to come up with sort of plan, book, pay to remove the friction like retailing typically struggles with. And that's why online is dominated, because the frictions have been removed. It'll just arrive on our doorstep, I think, while we're actually having this conversation today.
Exactly.
Right? And so I believe we have to remove passionately these frictions and put new products and reinvent on an asset base, but on a policy where this region's been a great vision to create an urban growth boundary. And in this urban growth boundary, we have to help advance policies that favor healthy choices of mobility over the single occupant vehicle congestion. So we have to leverage policy in the back room to leverage our services on the front and our products to go with that. So you're right. We're going to have to fight harder than I believe we have in the past to tilt the playing field for all those reasons to making sure we are relevant. Things like Wi-Fi go, okay, that works. I think you're going to start to see conversations like congestion pricing. When you start to unbundle the real cost of the roadway and consumption of it, that tilts the playing field where people have ridden for free on the tax system, on the road system. I think you're going to see more conversations like that, not only here, but in other parts of the world who've done that. And that allows people to make other value proposition choices of cost and services as well. So it's a complex subject, but it's one that the agency, I think, was a few years ago, we have a 5-year plan that gets to those types of things, including how to drive ridership and increase the experience on top of policy changes.
It's so comforting to hear that you're thinking about these important issues. That's very good.
And one I would add here is also, and the board is going to talk about this later today, is transit-oriented development. This region, I believe, needs to become more assertive in its application of leveraging these amazing distribution channels of services we have, a bus, train, or other, and leveraging our real estate footprints around the stations to not just spread this way, but we've got to go up, and to allow all types of people to live in those communities where they may, in fact, not need a car because the services work on their terms. Part of the strategy we embarked on several years ago was we can't get to transit-oriented development on a consistent, aggressive basis in this region around transit if we don't have on-time performance that's really strong, so people can rely on us. So we moved literally a few years ago from when the average was 75% on-time performance for MAX for a whole month. Now we're actually over 90%. So we've come up over 15 full percentage points in our trust of the public. The bus systems moved from 80.1. We're now up in the high 80s on a public road network system. So we've had to rewire ourselves internally, adding bus rapid transit lines, for reconfiguring, speed our system up, and provide a better experience. And part of the region's challenge, to be honest, is we have about a 4% transit modal share in this region, based on Metro's numbers in 2015. We've got to get to double-digit modal share. So we actually have the products and the services and the frequency out there where people go, like smaller footprints like a London or Stockholm, which I visited with the governor this last fall. They're at 44% modal share for transit. So we have got to move up, and with it, the foundation will be a change of policy and culture, I believe, and with it will come the products.
Great, thank you.
If you ever follow up,
Sure.
Kelsey, part of Chair Burns' question had to do with lowering minors.
I'm sorry, I apologize, Commissioner, you're cutting out. The others are hearing you, but I'm struggling a little bit. Sorry.
Mr. Behringer asked about about luring riders back, and you talked about cash, and you talked about cost, as if you were talking exclusively about a rider like me, an individual person. But you mentioned the potential long-term effect of different workplace behaviors. And so my question is, in luring people, what is your outlook for the relationship you have with employers to provide annual transit passes for workers who now maybe are only going to be in the office one day a week or 2 days a week, who sell monthly passes in their place of employment? What's your strategy for returning to employers as well?
Yeah, you could be asking a more timely question. This is literally unfolding as we speak, where many large employers are no one's escaping from this economic challenge we all have, including the large employers. And so we have an employer pass program, and they've been asking for changes to it over quite a number of months. So we're literally in discussions with them now around what that might look like. My own viewpoint is that without us also selling the farm, the service is valuable. And so in this environment, over the next year, we're going to have to put a program in place for the next year to get us through. And one of the commitments I've asked for my own team is I want to go back and strategically look at what the program of the future needs to look like. So for the longer term. So your question is timely. Don't have the answer for it other than what do we have to do in the short term to manage through that dynamic until we can get to a new relationship place. So I don't have that full answer right now. Bernie, I don't know if you want to jump in on this. That thing that I missed.
Bernie, you might be on. Yeah, Doug, everybody's cutting out a little bit, but can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hello? Yeah. I think Doug hit it pretty well. We need to be flexible and adapt to the reality that the employers are experiencing. There's two challenges for many of them. One is just the number of employees that have been furloughed or laid off is not an ongoing situation. It's going to change over the course of the year. And typically we establish our big customers on an annual contract, so we'll have to find some way to be flexible around that. And then the other is that a lot more of their employees are telecommuting than they have historically, so reflecting that as well in how we put together our contracts with the employers is going to be important. So we're working through that negotiation right now.
Thank you. I did not really expect to answer Mr. Kelsey because of the speculative nature, but I appreciate that you're thinking about it because I think it's also a key towards I think the workplace will look different based on this experience. So we need to take it over. So thank you very much.
Okay, that's the end of our formal questions. Thank you all for your contributions to this discussion. I'll now check with Craig. Craig, does anyone from the public want to join us?
Okay. Now, this is brand new territory for us. We don't normally get a lot of public comment, but there are over 20 people signed up to listen.
Oh, okay.
I do not know how many want to speak, but if you would like to speak, please click the hand raise icon that is somewhere on your screen.
And Craig, if I could just add to that, we have 3 people who can raise their hand within the WebEx meeting. We have another 21 that are on the phone only. If the people on the phone would like to raise their hand, the dial pattern for that is *9.
Okay. And Jeffrey, can you help me through this? This is a new experience.
Sure. So again, on your participant panel, at the very bottom is the attendee list. We have 2 attendees with their hand raised so far.
I see those.
and you have the ability to unmute them at this time.
Okay, so this is how we will do this. Time constraints are on us. We're way past our deadline here for this meeting. But I can speak for the commissioners. I know they would really like to hear from the public. But I have to ask you to keep it short, given the number of people who are waiting to speak, I think. So there are only 2 hands up. I will call on Lee Helfand right now. And Mr. Helfand, would you go ahead, please? Let me unmute you. Okay, I'm hitting the unmute button, Jeffrey, and it's not unmuting.
Okay, let me help you with that.
Please, thank you.
Okay, Lee, you should be able to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you for taking my public comment. My name is Lee Helfand. I use they, them pronouns. I grew up riding transit in and around the Portland metro area, so a long-time rider here. I am extremely concerned, as many people are, about how Portland and my communities are going to be recovering from this pandemic and how folks are going to be getting around as we come out of the pandemic as well. I think it's pretty clear that TriMet and transit agencies around the country have urged riders to stay off of buses except for essential trips, but I think as has been articulated earlier, the weight of that message definitely needs to be balanced by a clear communication plan. That our movement of the entire city depends on people riding transit once testing and a vaccine are available. I'm super concerned about potentially impending gridlock in the city. I know gridlock is something we've experienced before, but I think people are going to be extremely scared to be riding transit. I am nervous that there's not a clear communication plans, and I am extremely nervous that Wi-Fi has entered the discussion as part of a potential incentive to ride on transit, as opposed to thinking about how we can reduce fares, expand low-income ridership. And I think it's also been said that leaders and staff are focusing on low-income communities and communities of color, but I really question what the engagement has looked like. This national money is coming down to TriMet. I don't know what a community engagement plan looks like in order to have a participatory, community-led process for how those dollars are spent. So I have lots of concerns, but I think what's clear is there needs to be a campaign to not only get ridership back up to where it was, but to increase it. I think as Portland continues to expand, that's going to become more important. I think that folks on this call today have kind of alluded to that, but I don't think it's clear that we necessarily have the same ways of thinking about how we go about that. I would just ask that you engage community, be super transparent about how community can help shape this messaging to get back onto transit, and clearly communicate to the public that, especially in this time, you will not be enforcing fares. You're calling them fare informers, but I don't know that that's been widely heard by the community. I think folks are still under the impression that fares may be enforced, and I think it's more important than ever to put people before profit in this case, even though we do need to acknowledge monetary discipline. Please clearly communicate to the public that you will not be enforcing at least till the end of this year. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comment. Craig, the next one? Yes, the next person is David Daly, and I will try to unmic now. There. David?
Hi, it's Dave Daly. You can hear me?
Yes,
Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Dave Daly. I'm a member of the Advisory Council at Multnomah County. Yesterday, we had a special meeting of our council together with the Disability Services Advisory Council to talk about an item in the Policy and Planning Department's budget that has to do with the right connection support. They've budgeted a very large decrease for ride connection services, and we're concerned because it looks, from what we can tell, that was done without a lot of consultation with the Human Services community, especially Washington County and Multnomah County. I'm not quite familiar with Clackamas, and consideration was not given to the fact that these ride connection services were designed to provide service to people who really have no other options. They do a lot of work out on the fringes of the TriMet system, and those people don't have a fixed route option, they don't have a paratransit option, and if that service is taken away, they're going to have absolutely no way to have freedom of movement where they live. What we're asking, we know this is going to be a difficult period the next couple of years. We have the same problem at the county because we've got tons of very painful cuts to make in the coming months. But yeah, I think it's very important that we identify people who don't have any other option, and this is the only way we can actually serve them. And I'm asking that TriMet, we submitted a letter to the board box as well. We're asking that TriMet, in this period before the budget becomes locked in stone, really take some time to assess the impact of that ride connection cut on these very vulnerable people, and to make sure that we're properly balancing their needs in this overall approach. That's what I've got. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Would TriMet like to respond to any of those comments before we close the hearing?
Yeah, sure, I would. Thank you. I'll take the second one first, and I'll work my way back up to number one if I can. So, to the ride connection discussion, firstly, the budget is about $2.75 million. As I've indicated earlier, we've cut back the rest of our transit system by, let's call it, 20%. The impact here that we're talking about is about 18% reduction. We have some flexibility. We actually don't know what ridership is going to come back like. I don't think anybody knows, including ride connection or our paratransit service. So part of this is maintaining flexibility. If we put it in the existing agreement, then we may lose that flexibility. So we want to keep flexibility available to us across the palette of our services, not knowing the potentially significance of the ups, downs, sideways of where our economy is going to be, let alone ridership. So we're looking at, right now, we're contemplating about an 18% reduction, again, less than the transit service reduction of essential service, but we will be monitoring this throughout the year. I have anticipated in the budget a larger than normal contingency, and that's part of the conservatism that Dee Brookshire referred to earlier, to monitor how this goes. And so we will work with Ride Connection. We also have a lot of paratransit service that reduced by 85%. And so where a lot of those are higher costs on your paratransit service than, say, a Ride Connection trip, but our fixed costs on paratransit, we have a lot of capacity to fill up there as well. think flexibility is going to be crucial here.
Okay.
That's the first point.
Sure.
The second point, I would, I think Mr. Helpman, if I understood his name correctly, and he covered quite a lot of topics there. And so I'll try and talk about the ones I'm able to. The firstly is people afraid to come back on transit, and I think that's true. In fact, a survey recently showed that 75% across the country were nervous about coming back to transit. So it's not just here in the Portland metropolitan region. So this is one of the real underpinnings of at a time where funding is even the most precious state, where we're actually investing in the cleaning. If people don't feel safe, in my opinion, even if you gave it away free, they're not going to come. And so part of this is really ensuring and doubling down on the investment of the cleaning standards, 4 hours or better, signage, putting signage on our seats that we will be moving to requiring masks. Not only requiring masks, but we're actually going to provide them. We're going to have, and I see sanitizers on a perpetual basis actually at the front of our buses, that as you tap that smart card, put the hand pump or however it's going to work. So everyone's going to have a role in the cleanliness of the environment that we have, not just the bus operators or our cleaning staff behind the scenes. So we're investing somewhere around $10 million more in funding across our system, and that's a target number to be 8 to 12, to ensure the system is clean for everybody. So that to me is the foundation of which we have to move these other things. The reference to Wi-Fi is only an example only, whether we do, but it gets to providing products and services to attract people that bring value to them and increase the experience beyond the transit trip. So that's going to work through our procurement processes and such like that. The goal is not for us to have to spend. The goal is to get third-party expenditures to actually write the check if we give them access to a whole bunch of other things of value that they may see. So we're working behind the scenes to look at concepts like that. The free fare conversation is a conversation. Personally, I'm of the belief there is no free. Someone has to pay. It comes out of one taxpayer pocket or another. So free is a relative thing. For the user may be free, but if we look at HB House Bill 2017, the previous pre-COVID revenue stream was about $55 million a year. If we move to a free transit system, you're looking well over double that to pay for all the service and all the capital and all the questions that the really great questions asked today. That's a significant amount of money. So someone is going to either have to generate that. It won't come from the fare box. That's just nowhere close to being enough. Because the same folks don't want any fare increase, let alone they want it free. So at a time when the state has asked for reductions in their own budgets by up to 17.5%, I think that's going to be a tall order to get to free. And free doesn't guarantee ridership. I'm actually personally of the belief that, like the reference, when you've got a 4% total share, investing in more services for the same dollar versus free actually drives more ridership. Giving people choices will actually get people out of their cars who have a choice to drive or take transit or walk cycle. So I think that needs a lot of discussion in the community. Happy to have that. I know it's part of the youth pass is part of the T2020 bond. Yes, sorry, go ahead, Dee.
No, we just need to I hate to interrupt because you're saying so much that we want to hear, but we do need to move on and close this meeting out. So Dave, back to you.
Yeah, I was thinking we have to be done by 9:30. So thank you for your comments from the public, and thank you for TriMet for all your excellent contributions to this meeting. And with that, I will close our hearing and open up a regular meeting of the TSCC and ask if any commissioner has any comments on the budget. And if not, I'll ask the executive director to give his review and recommendations for the budget.
Thank you, Chair Behringer. The budget was put together well this year, in spite of everything. And we are recommending that you certify the budget without any recommendations or objections, period. And I really appreciate the way that the TriMet finance staff has helped us during this hard time in analyzing and preparing this budget recommendation for you.
Great, thank you. Does any commissioner have any comments?
I did just want to say, actually, in addition to the staff, I just wanted to thank all the board members who participated in this meeting under these circumstances. I do think it was a really good discussion that we had today, and we're appreciative of you chiming in as well.
Well, thank you. With that, may I have a motion authorizing the commission to sign the certification letter as recommended by the staff?
I'll move.
Okay. May I have a second?
This is Margot, I'll second.
Great. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion carries, and our meeting is over. Thank you, everyone, for participating. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.